And because I'm really happy that you're here today, and so thank you for joining us. And I think this is an important conversation for us. In light of the geopolitical landscape, and what it means for Canada, and we have elections on the horizon here at home. So we thought we can discuss, what might be some of the priorities and areas of focus for a conservative government when it comes to our North and Arctic politics. And I think it's important maybe to just even reaffirm again that you are the Shadow Minister for Northern Affairs and Arctic Sovereignty, and you've been in this position, I think, for three years now. So I think you're immersed in all things Arctic issues on a regular basis. So I think it's perfect that you're here to talk about this. So let's just start, very general question, and then we can kind of dive into more of the details. And so what do you think will be some of the priorities, areas of focus for a conservative government when it comes to Canada's North and Arctic geopolitics? Sorry if you can't hear me.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that question, but before I get into that, I wanted to give a shout out to the guy that got me into this, Aaron O'Toole. He was the leader of our party at the time, and he really wanted to focus and prioritize the Arctic. So he gave me the role of Arctic sovereignty. And since then, I understood basically what that meant, but I think it was Arctic 360 is one of the first events that I attended, made a lot of contacts there, and since then have become, I guess, an expert, in our caucus around Arctic stuff. So thank you, Aaron, for that. Thank you for prioritizing it. And Aaron has been on the Arctic file for a long time. He was a part of a crucial committee report about Arctic sovereignty, what we need to do, what are sort of the shortcomings in the Arctic currently. And we still have a ways to go, as you highlighted, Aaron. So, but anyway, kudos to you, Aaron, for doing that. Still at it and working hard.
I'm just going to say one thing really quick to follow up, because when you did come to our conference, this was not I'm going to kind of cruise in and cruise out. I mean, you were there. Yeah. You sat in your chair and you took a lot of notes and you talked to a lot of people. And I just have to say, it was new to you as a space, but you were a good student, and I think you've taken it seriously.
About the priorities too. I was getting to your question.
Go for it.
I think generally speaking, and you've seen a lot recently about what Trump has done, but also our response to that. Pierre Poilievre is our leader. But it's to secure our borders is a high priority, and especially our northern border. It's one thing that we've had many discussions, even though you haven't heard a lot talked about over the last number of years. It's been in the backroom conversations with leadership, most definitely with our party, that we've been talking about Arctic sovereignty issues, Arctic sovereignty and security issues. So building the military, rebuilding the military is going to be a focus. Pierre has talked about that many times as well, with the focus on securing the North.
Great. Why don't we could start there. So why don't we kind of dive in there a little bit and get right to it then in that way. How then would a conservative government approach the big issue of the day, U.S.-Canada Arctic cooperation?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by backing it up a little bit. So my role when Aaron gave it to me, my first priority was to get up there, to really see what was going on in the Arctic, and saw a lot of good things that happened. CHARS, the Canadian High Arctic Research Station that we were a part of starting under Prime Minister Harper. Great situation up there, hosts researchers from around the world in the Arctic, Canadian researchers as well. So that, I've seen a lot of good things going on with the FOLs, and whether it's Inuvik, Iqaluit, Yellowknife. Got to go out on an icebreaker after making a contact with the Coast Guard here. So a lot of good things going on there. But in terms of what I saw, there was still a lot that was needed, that was lacking. And I guess maybe this is based on our adversaries prior, like our two adversaries that I would mention today would be China and Russia. Weren't necessarily adversaries in the way they are now, where they're having flights that are sort of challenging the geopolitical peace that used to exist in the Arctic. And with that challenge now, we have to realize that now we have to do something about those challenges. And we look at what we have for infrastructure, we're sorely lacking in many ways. So I think what we're tasked with is, okay, what are the priorities? How do we address those priorities? And I'll bring it to this. It's easy for us sitting here in Toronto to talk about priorities in an Arctic situation up there, but what really stood out to me is I met a lady in Cambridge Bay. And when we talked about Arctic sovereignty security, she actually teared up and was crying to me, concerned about this threat, this imminent threat that from another nation that had sailed through our Northwest Passage. And what we, as a Canadian government, what were we going to do to make sure that she was safe? Because again, this is her front yard. It's our backyard down here. It's her front yard. And what are we going to do to make sure that she's protected along with her family? And there's a lot that goes with that. Who's controlling the resource development that happens in the north? Who's, basically controls our own area up there. So I saw it firsthand, the concerns, and then it really makes you, okay, we need to really deal with this and do something about it. And
which is perfect. Then I'll kind of circle back over to kind of thinking more Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So the infrastructure deficit, right?
Yeah.
Is there any thoughts on how it might be possible and mechanisms that could be put in place to help attract investments and enable growth? It's an area of great potential, but not yet realized. And so, and I think one piece of this, of course, it goes the critical minerals economy, but of course this comes back to having, getting investments up there and infrastructure, and it's social, it's economic. And then, of course, defense as well.
And there's things that need to be done up there. We have a lot of minerals that are there that the world wants and needs, and especially our American neighbor, critical minerals more specifically. So we need to look at what needs to be done regulatory-wise to speed up that development. I had a conversation in Yukon after I was here, and I asked the Chamber of Mines up there, because there was a critical mineral strategy that was announced by the current government. To great fanfare, and at the time it was 8 years to 2030 when this would be achieved. And I said, so how does that look? As miners, what does it look like for you? Is this a good thing? And they laughed at me. They said, well, if we think we're going to develop critical minerals within 8 years, we'll be lucky to get it done within 30 years with the current regulatory environment. So we need to look at what we need to change there to really speed up development. Our leaders spoken very specifically about getting our development up and going. We have so much potential, not just in Canada, but specifically in the north, but it's untapped right now, and it needs to be realized. And one thing that I saw very clearly and heard stories, how important that development is to local Nunavummiut or Nunavaliut, anybody across the north really wants to see that development happen, just done in a safe, what's good for the environment way.
Absolutely. So, a lot of the topics that we do talk about, and we'll get into, quite a bit tomorrow, is on, how do we engage the investment space? Anything from a pension fund to a bank.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we know that access to these resources are a national security and defense issue. And so, we've talked a lot about China and Chinese investment and how to, not have nefarious investments, let's say, in our north. But we also know, and this gets really into the heart of some of the geopolitics at hand right now. So, the U.S. Department of Defense has funded several Canadian, help to get things moving, funding critical minerals projects. And there is a lot of interest in terms of U.S. investment. Is there a worry, and is there maybe thoughts on how to make it more balanced, that, the North could be kind of overtaken in a way by an influx of U.S. capital, both on the private side, but on the government side as well, like from defense?
Well, I don't know. I think we need to be concerned about any foreign investment, that it's an ally, first of all. The U.S. is an ally. Unlike, maybe I'll speak to the Chinese investment. We used to, again, they were former, I'd say, more allies than they are adversaries, kind of the way we see them in their current situation. And so that we've I think the current government's even addressed that by the vital metals example is one example. The only critical mineral development in the north, again, that was brought to great fan for the Prime Minister, cut the ribbon. Within months, it had gone bankrupt because the price plummeted and they couldn't make money developing our critical minerals. So, and then again, a Chinese investment came in and attempted to acquire that. So I think we need to do more on that side to make sure that investment is very limited. And there's certain triggers already or limiters to that foreign investment. Right now, I think what we're looking at is actually getting development done in the north. We see a lot of gold mining happening in Nunavut and across the territories, but I'm not concerned with our American allies and their investment in the north and being overtaken. You know, the one thing that was clear to me, I've met with a lot of U.S. attachés in Ottawa and on the ground in the north. And our American neighbors really want to just see us take care of our own house. They want to make sure that we defend our borders, and they will gladly stand as a friendly neighbor in that defense of our North American coastline. So I think that's been that way for a long time, and I think looking at our American friends to the south as allies, that's the way I would view it. And how we can develop our north with that cooperative relationship that we already have. We just, again, we've seen some challenges recently with the new president, but I think what I've even seen, it's causing us, and we talked about this before, it's causing us to do a lot of things we really wanted to do anyway, especially from the opposition side, wanted to secure our Arctic sovereignty. And now we have a president that has expectation that we're going to do exactly that, and that to me is a good thing.
Yeah. On that note, so people have been reading the news. I guess Premier Danielle Smith, she proposed that maybe Canada should set up a joint, NORAD military base in the north. And I'm wondering if that's something that's of interest, considered, just it was thrown out. I don't know.
Yes. Well, NORAD's a very important relationship that we support, obviously. There's a lot of things that we actually have some plans. We've been planning our Arctic policy for a long time, and I'm not going to say too much before an election, but there's going to be some good announcements coming out of those conversations, and some of those announcements might happen before the election as well. So I'd just say stay tuned on those announcements. But I think any support for NORAD modernization, we obviously support that. But as I think my former colleague said too, we've seen a lot of talk about NORAD modernization, but little has been delivered up till now.
Yeah. And is that like an area where there could be a lot of, I don't know, Canadian investment? I'm just wondering if it's in Canada, if maybe Canada would build the base and kind of own the base, and but in a cooperative moment.
Without committing specifically to that base, but the multi-use infrastructure is something that we've been supportive of before. And I think it's the answer to many of those questions about how do we kind of do both, because both are necessary, both are expected. There's some significant projects that I would say we would prioritize in the north, whether it's a road access highway project, whether it's on the western Arctic side or the mid-Arctic place, without getting specific with names. But any of those projects, I think, would serve the north very well, and it would also serve that obligation, the NATO obligation that's expected of us.
Just to pick up a little bit on that, so as we've kind of discussed, we don't always see eye to eye with the U.S. or other allies on Canada's legal stance on the Northwest Passage, and I'm wondering if there's some thoughts on where to set up a good cooperation, but agree to disagree, I guess, in that way.
Well, I guess we see it from Canadian perspective. From our perspective, we see it as it belongs to Canada. It's clearly within our territory. I'd say just look at the map and the Arctic shelf. It's well within our what we recognize as Canadian territory. So that's. I do think, though, we need to, and I've got proposals put forward about how we manage the Northwest Passage, but again, I'll leave that for a future announcement. But I think to answer your question more generally, we need to deal with the reality that that Northwest Passage is going to be more open than it used to be, and be able to be transited by ships from around the world, and it's happened. We see cruise ships going through there now as well as others. So we need to manage that, and not just manage it in, and I think the former speaker here with Aaron said it, not where we just can kind of identify who's there, but actually have an ability to say, sorry, no, you can't come through here. I think that needs to be looked at a lot more seriously, especially considering who our adversaries are and their interests in the Arctic.
And so, I mean, obviously we're not going to talk numbers or anything, but is it safe to say, or not, there'd be the commitment to meet 2%?
Yeah, well, what our leader recently said, and he said, well, I haven't made that commitment. And the reason is we have to first form government to see what's left in the cupboards. And that's what he's made very clear comments on. He has said that Canada normally punches above its weight. And sometimes it's using a resource properly as opposed to sort of inadequately. So just spending money to spend money was what he was saying doesn't get us to where we need to get to. But we need to be very specific in what we spend money on when we talk about Arctic sovereignty security. And so that's as much as he's spoken about that particular issue. But again, I would just say watch very closely our announcements on what we're going to be doing in the Arctic.
Canada's current Arctic foreign policy, it calls for reestablishing an Arctic ambassador. And this is something that the Conservative government would pick up on.
Yeah, so we, and the leader made some comments about it earlier. We saw it, I'll back it up too. I was impressed by the Americans appointing an Arctic ambassador. It took a long time for that individual to be sort of affirmed. And I don't know what the status of it is now. I haven't seen who the new Arctic ambassador is in the new regime. Yeah. But that said, so I respect that role, and I see it being a good role going forward. But I think what our leader said is before we establish more bureaucracy in the Arctic, we need to make sure it's defended first. So let's focus on getting that NORAD modernization. Let's get that done, and then let's look at more diplomacy and diplomatic efforts after.
And I guess when you say, though, the NORAD modernization piece, would that include then kind of going back to the multi-purpose infrastructure?
Yes.
So it's also looking at social, economic.
Yeah, and I'll just say this. So we did an order paper question on the $38.6 billion that's been referenced. That's the NORAD modernization announcement. And so as my role as Northern Affairs, Arctic Sovereignty, Northern Economic Development, how much has the government currently spent after this? It's been 2 years, it's imminent threats are there. And all we saw was $40 million get spent on building the bureaucracy and $30 million on building a capacity. And that means no assets have been built to this point. So again, what we need to build those assets. We need to build what's necessary to protect the Arctic. And again, that's why Pierre's comment came out of that, okay, look, it's not getting done, it needs to get done, and it needs to get done now.
So, the one thing that we talk about oftentimes at our conferences, but elsewhere, is the North is not a political, it doesn't only fare towards one political party. Mm-hmm. It's across the board, and we spend a lot of time talking about how to build, kind of like an all-party consensus. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if and also because a lot of this it's a long term, right? It's a long game, and yep. So there has to be stuff that happens now, but also stuff that's going to be realized over a long term. And do you see areas in where there are opportunities to have, across the board efforts to create policy, to create certain areas of interest that could then, bring all of Canada together to be thinking about how do we build our North and safeguard it. And
I think you said it too. Your neighbor had actually spoke to you about it in Toronto that talked about how important Arctic sovereignty and security is to her. And I backed that up about 3 years ago. I wouldn't take full credit for it either. I'm not taking that. But the fact that now it's being talked about in places like Toronto at kitchen tables at dinner time about how important Arctic sovereignty and security is a good thing. And so this is where I think it can sort of cross over those partisan lines. It's going to be a consistent effort, no matter who's in government, to make sure that the Arctic remains sovereign and it's secure. And so I think now this issue, it's pushed it to the forefront again. It's been brought by the current government, is being brought forward by us as a future top priority. And so that's how I think it's there. And I think we just need to start building that infrastructure and building that over the long term. We talked about submarines earlier, whether it's ship procurement or you name it, icebreakers, submarines. Those are long-term projects, and they need to be committed to by successive government. So I think we're there. And a lot of us do work together. I see Yvonne Jones is here. A lot of us that work on this file, her and I are on the sort of the parliamentarian arm of the Arctic Council. And a lot of the stuff we do work on together, but often there's elections and it changes a bit. But I think there is a consistent that it does matter. We just, I think, need to deliver on that and see dollars spent and assets built.
Yeah, and ensure it's fulfilling. It's got the social infrastructure that's required to build communities in order.
Well, and I want to say it's an opportunity before I forget to just say thank you. Is the fact that Arctic 360 is here and a thing is in large part due to you, and it remains a priority, and that's why we all gather. It gathers us in a room. I think that some of us may not understand how much of a priority, how important it is until we get here, and then we realize how important it actually is. Yeah. So thank you for.
Yeah, it's way beyond me. It's an invention of a few of us that several of us who thought we needed to be having these conversations as Canadians. Okay, let's just step outside then a bit beyond internally and move over to Canada-Greenland Arctic cooperation. There's been some discussion of it already today. And so in the current foreign policy, there's a discussion that there's going to be a consulate that's going to be opened in Nuuk. And also at the same time, Greenland's going to be opening one in Ottawa. And so, just thinking about thoughts on what a conservative government, that's something that would be.
Well, again, I think it's similar to what I said before in Pierre's response is instead of building, our priority is not to build bureaucracy at this point. And I know there's some good bureaucracy, don't get me wrong. But I think for now, we need to prioritize getting that sovereignty and security and the assets needed to defend it. NORAD modernization's a key part. We need ships built. We need facilities to receive the new incoming F-35s, to be interoperational with our other NATO countries. So there's things that need to be done, I think, before that. Do I think it's important? Yes, I do. There's ambassadors in the room today, very important individuals. That's how we have a good relationship, is often through the ambassador, and that's where it starts. But I think for us, if we're going to build anything, it's going to be those other assets first.
Yeah. Okay. I will. Do you though see? Because a lot of this, though, it's like it becomes there's the domestic and the internal, but it just so becomes interconnected. And a lot of this had to do with we're talking about with U.S.-Canada relations, and is there something to be said when you sit next door on a day-to-day basis and have your American counterparts and European counterparts?
Well, and we're doing that now. I met with U.S. Consul General in Tuktoyaktuk, and I've met with the former U.S. Ambassador in Ottawa several times. I've met with the U.S. attachés many times in Ottawa, talking about these very issues. So it's not like these conversations are already happening. They are. Now, is this other role going to prioritize it even more? Potentially, yes, and potentially a good thing. But it's not like those conversations aren't happening now.
And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts. I think we're maybe a little bit becoming more and more aware that NORAD and NORAD modernization, but we're kind of bookended, and so and there's been more NORAD kind of with the fighter jets going over over Greenland, and I'm just wondering if there's yeah, thoughts on strengthening that cooperation also with Denmark, Greenland, something like this, and just in terms of
Oh, well, no, I think...
securing the whole,
Yeah, no, I think you said shrinking?
No, I didn't say shrinking. Strengthening.
Strengthening,
Maybe,
yeah.
sorry.
No,
Sorry.
absolutely. No,
I was like, what did I say?
yeah, no, well, no, the whole NATO relationship is very important to us, and we need to strengthen that relationship. And again, we're acquiring the F-35, which is a good thing. That's an asset that we'll use together as part of that NATO team in the Arctic. And so I think, strengthening that relationship is even more important now. And anybody in this room has seen those news stories. It used to be where a Chinese plane would go into close to our airspace by itself, and Russian aircraft and ships into our airspace and waters. But now we see them cooperating together. And the last, and I've done videos on it, is that when Russia is asking China to help them with surveillance in the Arctic because they're a little busy in Ukraine right now, we need to work better together to make sure that we're on top of things in our Arctic. And I think that's through NATO. But again, it can't just be as sort of the underspending a member of it either. It has to be somebody that spends and that really steps up to the plate and shares the load with our NATO members properly.
I want to make sure I give time for people to ask questions. So does anyone have it? Yeah. Oh, Craig, there we go.
Hi, Craig Fleener from Alaska. Are you gonna take that one?
Oh, hi.
Thank you. Craig Fleener from Alaska. One of the things that I know has been talked about in some circles, but I don't think enough, you mentioned it a little bit, the critical minerals issue.
Yeah.
And I think that I believe, as do some others, that we need a critical minerals alliance between our allies,
Yeah.
so that we can go from cradle to grave in finding and developing and extracting, et cetera, all the way to producing our own materials with them. How do we get that idea put up as a priority in this government and other governments to make sure that we're working together and not sending everything to someone who is
Right.
called themselves our adversary? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, and I think that with the new U.S. president and maybe a potential future government, we're not government yet. We're opposition. So that potential relationship, I think, would work on how do we do it with the mutual benefit of both of our nations as a benefit to North America, really. And I don't think the president is wanting just a win. Some say he needs somebody else to lose for him to have a win. I don't see it that way. What I've seen in his negotiations, he's okay if somebody else wins as long as he's winning too. And I think in that kind of response with critical minerals, we both can win. And I seen, the one story that we had where critical minerals, with a strategy the Prime Minister was cutting the ribbon at, that particular project went bankrupt. So we have problems around getting these projects developed and in a timely fashion. You heard my comments about from miners saying it's going to take more than 30 years to get that stuff done. I think with the new reality in North America, and with us potentially coming in as government, I think you're going to see some changes made that we can go both get these developments off the ground in a much more timely fashion.
Mead.
Thank you for your presentation and your work. How do you see the three-way agreement between Finland, Canada, and the United States working on icebreakers?
Yeah.
And also to Jessica's article this morning in the Globe and Mail, how do you see us cooperating on northern seaways between the United States and Canada?
So before I answer your question, I'm just going to finish off a part for him. So this is from our leader, Pierre, okay? This was a quote from a few days ago. "We should be the richest nation on earth. These tariffs are a wake-up call that it is time for us to meet our potential. It is time for us to be a country that can trade with itself, a country that harvests its own resources, that secures its borders to protect its people, that builds its military to protect its sovereignty, unites its people to protect our common history and common future. We will always put Canada first." And that's from Pierre, very pro-development, very, with a sovereignty focus being the reason behind it all. So I just would answer the procurement on icebreakers specifically in your question. So maybe I'll start off by answering your question with a different answer than what you're asking me. We looked into the icebreaking situation in Canada. There's been some successes. The AOPS ships are arriving late, but they're arriving. Rick Perkins is a friend of mine, and he's on Fisheries and Oceans Committee. We did some stuff. He did an order paper question on how much is the icebreakers. The one icebreaker that was supposed to arrive in 2017 was supposed to be 720 million, and that was for one. Now we're at 2 icebreakers. Guess how much the cost has ballooned to? 8.5 billion for 2. So we have a procurement problem in Canada, and it's around icebreakers. And the sad part of it is what I haven't even said yet, is those icebreakers won't even be ready until 2031 and beyond. Ships that were supposed to be ready years ago. So we have a problem with procurement around icebreakers, and it's leaving us short where we need the assets, which is in the north. So I think any relationship that can get icebreakers built more timely and for a better price is a good thing. That said, we still support procurement in Canada. We support the shipbuilding going on in Canada. It supports Canadian jobs. But I think that the fact that they're looking at an answer to this problem around procurement is a good thing. And what was your last question?
Cooperation on seaway.
I didn't read Jessica's article this morning. My apologies. I was reading other stuff. But
Do your homework.
yeah, I should have.
Just about thoughts on how to, where there could be cooperation, how to cooperate.
Just in the Northwest Passage specifically?
Yeah, I mean, even in terms.
Oh yeah, right. That was your question.
From
yeah.
anywhere from Coast Guard to.
Yeah. So no, and I think it's a good thing. I think we need to. I think first of all we need to manage the seaways. The Northwest Passage is open right now, and all we seem to do. And I was up in Iqaluit where we actually saw the ships going through the Northwest Passage, and the Coast Guard's doing a great job at monitoring that traffic and even breaking ice for the traffic. But we need, I think, a stronger authoritative measure there that not just sees what's there, but also can prevent access to that to hostile nations. Because it is within our footprint as Canadian citizens. It's territory that belongs to Canada. And I think we need to defend it, and to do that, you need to set up a more secure way of managing that seaway. And I'm sure and this is, again, we've had this conversation with our American counterparts, with the U.S. attachés, and they just, if it's a cooperative effort between us and them, that's fine. I think they just want to see, this is a clear message to me, it's very blunt, it's just, you guys take care of your own house, please. And I think we need to step up and respond to that.
I'm looking around. I'm just going to say one thing I'm thinking,
Yeah.
and I appreciate Craig's comments, and and I say this because I say when I like things and they're a good idea. So there's no party thinking on any of this stuff. But the whole critical minerals space itself is relatively new, and so there's a lot of opportunity to figure out how to build supply chains and what they are. And the federal government did put a lot of time and energy to build a critical mineral strategy. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, we have something that's just the first step to kind of say that a strategy and how to think about these things going forward. And so, hopefully maybe, or that's an area where, all parties can kind of,
Well,
think
and this is one, so just because we're in opposition doesn't mean we dislike everything that's brought forward by the government. If it's a strategy that works, I'm all about an answer. If it works, it doesn't matter which party brings forward the answer, then good, it works. But the only issues that we've been hearing is it's had its challenges. But we also want to see a critical mineral strategy be successful, because we know that the elements and the minerals are there. We know that the Canadian jobs are there waiting as well for this strategy to get off the ground. And it's going to benefit should benefit all Canadians and really North America.
Yeah. First one for Canada, so maybe,
absolutely.
But actually, 9 seconds left. Okay. I'll let you go over.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just maybe a comment. I'm from the European Union, and we actually have with Canada, it's been a few years now, a strategy cooperation strategy on critical raw material, and we hope it will continue to strengthen in the years to come, because we are both very reliable partners, and this is a very important issue and an important domain for us to work on. Just this piece of information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and just to maybe speak to that, one thing, who knows about Baffinland iron mines here? It's a great ore. I've heard that it's 66% iron in the ore, so it pretty much comes out, you can put it and melt the rock as it comes out of the ground. It's that rich. And that really makes it green, the potential to build green steel with, because it needs a lot less energy to produce that steel. So we can look at things that sort of limit our potential and get stuck there, and I think some of the policies have limited our development that way, or we can look at the bigger picture. We can actually do a whole bunch of good things for the globe in developing our resources, and LNG is another one. I'm from northern British Columbia, where natural gas, we can reduce emissions around the world if we just get our natural gas to the world that wants it. So a lot of potential, we just got to get there.
Anyone else? I'll give you the last word if you have anything final.
Yeah, well, I'd say just reiterating what our leader has said. We want to focus on protecting our borders in response to what the president is expecting us to do. But it's not something that's just arrived on scene just since the president is challenging us to do that. We've always wanted to do it from leaders like Aaron before. We've wanted to secure our Arctic, and it really provides sovereignty and security to the people that live in the Arctic for a long time. And I'm glad it's finally pushing us to get it done.
Yeah. I guess we need a Team Canada North.
That works.
So there we go.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was good.